About 200 persons in various facets of the engineering profession attended today's luncheon. The luncheon is the highlight of Engineering Week, observed across the country. It's held each year during the week of Washington's birthday in light of the fact that George Washington was a land surveyor and engineer. Both military and civilian engineers participated in today's affair, as well as representatives of the State Highway Department. Governor Fob James, himself an engineer, addressed the group. The governor spoke on several issues confronting the state: the prison situation, the new Constitution, waste in government. But the point James touched on first was education and competency testing.
And I hope nobody underestimates our resolve to start with testing this spring and then follow through step by step every day for 4 years from the time we know where we stand, to monitor the curriculum of every school, to monitor the results of every school through task force and direct communications through the Department of Education, to jump right in the middle of that pond with one goal in mind, and that is literate comprehension in the full scale of the word.
A spokesman for these engineering professionals says inviting Governor James to the luncheon was the logical choice. After all, America's first president was an engineer turned politician. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News, reporting.
Alabama's 14-point win over Florida last night was overshadowed by the individual performance of Reginald King, who played his last home game before the fans in Tuscaloosa. The All-American finished with 27 points and 15 rebounds, and in the process, the Mule became the all-time leading scorer at Alabama, breaking the record held by Leon Douglas with this free throw in the first half. The crowd then gave him an immediate standing ovation. Another 5-minute ovation came when King was taken out of the game late in the second half. The inside play of King was complemented last night by hot outside shooting by Ken Johnson and freshman Eddie Adams, who has been starting since guard Joe Hancock was suspended last week. Coach C.M. Newton said he was pleased with the inside play of freshman Philip Lockett, who finished with 12 points, including this stuff in the first half. Alabama led for the entire game except for 1 point early in the second half when the Gators pulled ahead by 2 points. But the Tide quickly came back and never let Florida get close again. Next up for the Tide is LSU Thursday in Baton Rouge, as Alabama tries for a second-place SEC finish and a bye until the semifinals in the postseason tournament in March. James Spann, WSFA TV Sports.
Auburn Montgomery finished third, and Southern Benedictine finished in your mind too. We have those. We had to work hard to get them last night, but we got all the games in the Southern States Conference, game by game. Winner will be the automatic playoff berth in the NAIA. And I think if the Montgomery people do not support this thing, that at our next conference meeting, that it will certainly go to Birmingham or Huntsville or someplace other. And if they don't support it, it would be my vote to do that, because I think that we're very appreciative of what the capital city Kiwanis has done down through the years. They took us, they warned us when nobody else did. And I just hope for their sake that the Montgomery people come out and support this basketball tournament. You're going to see a great brand of basketball. I don't think there's a small college or large college basketball, any better basketball played than you'll see played right here at Huntington College Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this week.
Concern over the proposed estuarine sanctuary in Florida grows. The president of the Tri-Rivers Association, E.E. Bishop, and the association's coordinator, Addie Summers, briefed ADO director Bobby Davis on the situation. According to Summers, if the sanctuary is granted for the Apalachicola Bay and River, it could seriously affect commerce and development upstream on the Flint and Chattahoochee rivers. Those two rivers make up the Apalachicola River. After the briefing, Davis said that he would relay the information to Governor Fob James.
Ms. Summers and Mr. Feaster came down and talked to us about the Tri-River situation, and we understand what it is, and we certainly don't want Alabama to be damaged in any way as far as
development of this river system and its commerce. And what we'll do with what they've told us, we'll go and talk to Governor James about it and brief him. And I'm sure at that point he'll make some decisions as to what direction we take.
One of the fears of the Waterway Association is that the state of Florida could prohibit commercial barge traffic from the state docks facilities at Columbia, Eufaula, and Phoenix City from moving through the sanctuary into the Gulf of Mexico. State Docks Director Bob Hope says if this happens, it would shut off that area of the state from the export market and definitely adversely affect the growing economy of the Wiregrass area. According to Hope, in 1978, those three docks facilities moved almost 100,000 tons of products, or about 25% of the system total. Hope says the state's investment in the Columbia site is $1,950,000. At Eufaula, $448,000, and in Phoenix City, $2,345,000. Former Governor George Wallace was concerned enough about the potential problem that he wrote a letter to Secretary of Commerce Juanita Kreps last November. So far, no reply has been received. Perhaps one explanation of this is the federal involvement in the Florida side of the sanctuary. In 1972, voters in the Sunshine State approved a $240 million bond issue to buy up land for the proposed sanctuary and other park areas in the state. Now, those land purchases are the subject of investigations by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the U.S. Justice Department. They have resulted in the suspension of Florida's Director of Natural Resources, Harmon Shields, who publicly admitted that he was one subject of the federal probe. That probe, which now includes a federal grand jury investigation, is looking into bribery, kickback, and racketeering charges in connection with the state's purchase of land for the sanctuary. So far, the Department of Commerce has not indicated if the designation will be granted. Meanwhile, the states of Alabama and Georgia want an opportunity to make their objections to plans that might affect their economy known. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Alabama Power Company President Joseph Farley continued his claim that his utility was suffering from a severe financial drain, this in the third day of his cross-examination before the Public Service Commission. Farley says that his utility has drawn revenue from every possible avenue and now has nowhere to turn except to the Public Service Commission. Farley also said his company was drawing an extremely small return on its investment, only 4.13%, well below the 14.24% approved by the Public Service Commission in the past. Farley told the commissioners that the utility faced the possible demerit in its credit rating, which could mean higher interest rates on any loans that it might get, and that would be absorbed by the customer through higher bills. Farley also said the company is investing nearly $1 billion in both its Farley nuclear power plant and its Miller steam plant, which now has no return being realized. The Public Service Commission questioned the 10.1% increase in peak power demand figure, citing a four-year average of only 3.36%. Farley said the 10% figure is fairly accurate because of a particularly low peak demand in 1977. Finally, Farley was asked whether or not the utility took advantage of the weekend ice storm to exhibit a shortage of manpower, leaving some people without power for as long as 72 hours. Farley said the company didn't schedule the ice storm to fall in the middle of its rate hike request hearings, nor did it in any way act slowly in the restoration efforts. Following Farley, Senior Vice President Elmer Harris detailed certain financial positions of the utility. Harris described the firm's money as only a step away from zero and unable to meet its present $240 million short-term notes should they be called upon to pay up, and also unable to issue either preferred or common stock because of its low revenue drawn from the present rates. Harris also said the Securities and Exchange Commission denied a request to extend its debt limitations. As to what it needs financially, Harris says it needs at least $100 million in emergency rate hikes during the next 4 to 5 months, and at least that much more in permanent rate increases by mid-1979. At the Public Service Commission hearings, Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Art is to freeze emotion, to capture a feeling. Those are the words of Jenny Reed. She was a creature of the arts. From a small child, she sketched flowers and small animals. She was born in 1946. In her 29th year, while living in a studio at Carolina and 16th Streets in San Francisco, Jenny Reed went out Before leaving, she cracked a window that night so Nugget, her pet cat, could come in from the daily trips cats take. Nugget got in, but so did the unknown person who stabbed Montgomery's Jenny Reed through the heart with a butcher knife, destroying her very talented life. That was 4 years ago. So far, no arrests have been made in the case. The parents of Jenny Reed remember her as independent, studious, and fearless. Her father says that may have contributed to her death if robbery was involved. Nicholas and Dallas Reed are the parents of Jenny Reed. They reminisce.
Jenny was just the closest thing to my heart that I had. She was the kind of imaginative little girl that you just loved. You always felt very close to and companionable with. She was very imaginative. We sort of made up games and stories. And it was always fun to be with her. It's hard to put my finger on any one particular experience with Jenny.
She always, Nick, in a way, was curious about everything. I think that's what made her so interesting. She was curious about everything from the time she was a little girl. And she loved animals. And this, I think, is all reflected in her sculpture. It's her, and she always was quite religious, too. All of these things made her a particularly, a special person. But in another sense, also, she was the center of the family in that she related to her brother and sister as well as to us. And whenever there was any problem, it was always Jenny who kind of straightened it out because she was gentle and because she didn't project herself. So, of course, she meant an awful lot to all of us.
Jenny Reed was well-traveled, attended the best schools. She was concerned with civil rights and hated war. Here are some of her words and the art of Jenny Reed. These are done in wood. St. John the Reaper, cat on free form, rooster. Of her love to work at creating art, Jenny Reed said, "I wish I didn't have to eat. I wish I didn't have to sleep. I wish I had 1 trillion lives to do all the trillion things I want to do." The Reed family hired a private detective to track down all leads in the murder of their daughter. So far, the Reed family say no new information has been uncovered. San Francisco police have not closed the case, but they are in the same predicament, no leads. And so the person who took the life of brilliant young artist Jenny Reed killed her, not knowing that she needed 1 trillion lives to create all the things she wanted to create. The murderer apparently didn't know that her wood sculptures, paintings, bronzes, and other creations will live forever. In her 29 years, Jenny Reed froze motions and captured many feelings through the exhibits at this gallery. An art critic said of Jenny Reed's death, "The killer of Jenny Reed took her life, but the murderer also took from the world the beauty and expression of her art." An art gallery was constructed in honor of Jenny Reed on the campus of Antioch College at Yellow Springs, Ohio. She is a graduate of that school. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Every day we receive a wide assortment of mail here at Channel 12 News. Some of it's informative, but some of it's just downright useless. However, this morning we received an interesting item in the mail. It's Congressman Bill Dickinson's weekly news column. In the newsletter, the Republican representative veered away from his usual topics of hunger, the wars, the economy, and other national and worldwide affairs, but rather he turned his attentions towards no-fault insurance. He said there was a need for such insurance to improve the current liability system. And to prove his point, he gave several examples of excuses given on accident reports and on insurance claim files. Here are just a few of those examples. Coming home, I drove into the wrong house and collided with a tree I don't have. I pulled away from the side of the road, glanced at my mother-in-law, and headed over the embankment. The guy was all over the road. I had to swerve a number of times before I hit him. The indirect cause of this accident was a little guy in a small car with a big mouth. In my attempt to kill a fly, I hit a telephone pole. I thought my window was down, but found it was up when I put my hand through it. The telephone pole was approaching. I was attempting to swerve out of the way when it struck my front end. An invisible car came out of nowhere, struck my vehicle, and vanished. And finally, there was this one. I was on my way to the doctor with rear end trouble when my universal joint gave way, causing me to have an accident. I'm Dave Rickey reporting. Happy driving.
The city is alleging that probate judge Walker Hobby cannot change election results. It contends that his only duty is to certify results that are given to him. Arguing for the city, Drayton Hamilton did not say that the first results were correct, only that probate judge Walker Hobby should have certified them. Meanwhile, County Attorney Knox Argo told the court that the city does not have the right to contest the election. That right is reserved for registered voters. He asked Judge Gordon to dismiss the suit on those grounds. Jim Ziegler again submitted a motion to intervene in the case on behalf of 11 residents of the Ravenwood area. He asked the court to review 7 allegedly miscast votes because the circumstances are the same as the original petitioners. In essence, the city is challenging the mechanism of the annexation election, and it is asking the court to review the entire election procedure from January 23rd until now. From the Montgomery County Courthouse, Janet May, WSFA TV News.
Draper Prison in Elmore County is the first of Alabama's 8 major correctional facilities to be visited by the Legislative Prison Committee. The committee, a liaison between the legislature and the governor, is comprised of 3 House representatives, 3 senators, Lieutenant Governor George McMillan, and House Speaker Joe McCorkadale. The committee members toured each section of the prison, talking with prison employees and prisoners alike. Representative Brooke Hines of Escambia County, chairman of the Joint Legislative Committee, says Draper has improved since he last visited.
I recall it's been some 18 months, 2 years since I've been here, is that it's in much better repair, it's much cleaner, a much more orderly place, and the food is certainly much more impressive. In general, I'm impressed with the improvement.
Could you pick out one strong point and possibly the weakest or the worst condition in the prison?
I'm not sure. This is, as I say, it's just the beginning of our study. That might be a little inappropriate, but I'd say that, of course, the main strong point is that the overcrowding here that we saw before has been lessened, and the place is just simply much cleaner.
The committee will conclude their tour of Alabama's prisons within 7 weeks. They must submit their report to the entire legislature by the 15th day of the regular session, which begins April 17th. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News at Draper Prison.
The 2.5-hour meeting reportedly contained as many as a dozen people. Budget Officer Jimmy Rayford left at least once to return with more materials dealing with finances. House Speaker Joe McCorkadale was also in on the meeting. Afterwards, the Speaker talked optimistically about the future of the prison system. Prison Commissioner Larry Bennett met with the governor privately after the conference, but he declined to say what the nature of the talk was. He did say during the meeting with other officials, the governor said that he wanted a prison system that Alabama can be proud of. Bennett said the governor wants a cost-effective plan to reorganize the department. He said they will be working on that plan and expanding it, and it should be ready in about 2 weeks. Talking of finances, Commissioner Bennett said personnel from the budget and finance offices took part in the discussions. He said they reiterated their need for a supplemental appropriation for current operational funding. According to Bennett, the prisons will need $3.8 million extra this year. He told reporters he offered to stay on the job or give it up. He said James told him he's still looking for someone to manage the prisons. Also discussed were prison sites. Bennett said new sites in the Tennessee Valley near Birmingham and sites near Montgomery are being considered. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Glad to be here.
Pleasure. think that,
It's such a very appreciate the training effort that's required in order to, make these people produce. But they're good, hard-working people from what I see, and I think that we'll have a good shot at success. We'll try like hell.
The 11-member committee consists of psychologists and education specialists from across the country. They will meet quarterly to advise the department in all aspects of programming for the mentally retarded. Mental Health Commissioner Taylor Harton asked the group to devote special attention to the severely and profoundly retarded. The group will also consider ways to upgrade existing mental retardation facilities.
We're supposed to evaluate programs, ongoing programs in the institutions as well as in the community services branch of the department, and attempt to make recommendations which we feel will improve services, training, treatment, rehabilitation of retarded people. The other aspect of our duties as we see them has to do with long-range planning for the state. What is going to happen to mentally retarded people in the state of Alabama 10 or 20 years from now? The committee is a multidisciplinary one. We have special educators, administrators, social workers, psychologists, physicians, medical people, and each one, of course, brings his own expertise to the area.
Currently, the committee is studying evaluations related to the court hearings. However, Dr. Ellis believes that recommendations will be forthcoming in the months ahead. Janet May, WSFA TV News.
She's a past president of the
Alabama Power Senior Vice President Helmer Harris told the Public Service Commission today that the utility is operating in a $313 million deficit. Additionally, Harris told the Public Service Commissioners that if the amount being sought was granted, it would enable the company to resume its full construction projects and other operations through at least September of 1980. Harris was asked by some if any less than the $288 million was granted, could they operate? Harris's answer was no. Harris also said the utility needed the requested rates to ensure its ability to meet the peak power demands projected for the year. Harris says presently, if there were more than one downed power plant, it would be trouble. Cross-examination of Harris also brought out the fact that Alabama Power is borrowing money from a New York banking syndicate at 18% interest. The utility, however, says this includes several fees and charges. Harris did say that of their $240 million in outstanding short-term debts, only $62 million of it was borrowed from Alabama banks at anywhere from 9 to 11.5% interest. On their savings brought about by layoffs in the past several months, Harris says they were saving a total of $6.4 million a month in salaries alone. When the figures were compared, it showed that the tree trimmers laid off were making an average of $1,360 a month, and that craft workers on construction sites were making nearly $1,800 a month. Harris called every one of those workers necessary to the company's full-scale operation. The power company's primary contention is that its ability to borrow and ultimately its ability to expand its credit lines are in jeopardy. The witnesses for the utility say that these hearings could either make or break the power company's credit ratings. The intervenors apparently are not arguing too strongly with the need for a rate increase. However, they're arguing about the amount of the rate increase that should be granted. Cross-examination has been questioning the utility's use of what it has and what it's asking for. These hearings are expected to wrap up within the next day, and the Public Service Commissioner's decision on the emergency $100 million rate increase could come shortly afterwards. At the Public Service Commission hearings, Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.